Welcome to Big City, Small Town, the weekly podcast all about San Antonio and the people who make it go and grow. I'm your host, Bob Rivard. We are getting a good reaction to the weekly newsletter we launched just 2 weeks ago. And as the San Antonio's mayor's race heats up in the coming weeks and we watch how policies enacted by the Trump administration affect San Antonio and South Texas, the newsletter will help you stay informed on current events and significant news developments locally. Just go to bigcitysmalltown.com and put your email in. No spam, we promise, and you'll get a confirmation email and we'll be on our way. And if you know me and you're lazy, you can just send your email to me and I'll put it in for you. There you go. Our guests this week are Elizabeth Stehl Kleberg and Meaghan Ritchie, who join us to talk about the nonprofit Parts Labor, which is the new Southtown artist residency that offers mid-career artist residents focused time, space, and resources in the pursuit of their creative work. I became aware of this year-old residency when Alicia Fitz, a ceramic sculptor and a close family friend based in Mexico City, was selected to be an artist in residence here. And in addition to providing artists with a historic home in Lavaca in which to reside and work, the residency uniquely includes childcare support for artists with children. That certainly caught our attention. Well, Liz, welcome to Big City, Small Town, and Meaghan, welcome to Big City, Small Town.
Thank you for having us.
Great to have you both. Liz, why don't you start by telling us the origin story behind Parts Labor and how that brought you and your husband, Matt Kleberg, to San Antonio. Matt is a well-known artist in his own right, and the Kleberg name is certainly a celebrated one in South Texas, synonymous with the King Ranch. So we're excited that you guys are here with Parts Labor, and we want to learn more.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having us. And yeah, we're super excited to just share Parts Labor with a broader community and get to share kind of what inspired us to start it and how it's been going and how we've kind of really relied on the excitement and encouragement from the local community to keep it growing. So thanks so much for having us again. Yeah, I grew up in Virginia originally and went to school there, went to the University of Virginia. I studied art and Spanish. Originally, I thought I would join the Peace Corps and was really not interested in pursuing an art career because it felt kind of silly and self-interested and self-focused. So I was studying anthropology in Spanish. Then I switched to public health in Spanish, found out I was horrible at science, decided I should stick with what I'm good at, which was art. So pursued an art degree at UVA and met my husband, Matt, there. So he was a couple years out of the program using the painting studio there. And so we got married, stayed in Charlottesville for a couple years, and then applied to grad school in New York. So took us to New York. We both studied painting there. I started making video and sculpture with another artist there. We started a collaboration and just kind of really, Matt and I both kind of grew artistically, just incredibly, inspired by all of the institutions and the kind of creative community there. And then had 2 little kids while we were in New York. And 2020, the pandemic kind of showed us that it was time to transition and look for a place ideally closer to family. My family's in Virginia. Matt is from here, or most of his family's here in San Antonio. He grew up in Fort Worth, but San Antonio looked like a super exciting kind of creative hub in a lot of ways. We knew a few artists who had moved here previously and obviously had a bunch of family. So it felt like maybe a place where we could start a new chapter, ideally find a space that we could make into a live work space, and then also kind of look for opportunities to broaden our practices to include a more community facing experience, which I think for me always felt like an art residency, but didn't know exactly how that would work. And yeah, when we moved here in 2020, we spent 2 years looking for an industrial kind of warehouse space to create a live workspace out of. And eventually we're super lucky and really privileged to get Peter Zubiati and Katie Pell's warehouse studio home in Lavaca. And we spent the last 2 years renovating that for our own live workspace. And it just so happened that the little bungalow next door to that building came available, and it became super obvious that that was our opportunity to host artists, host families, and bring kind of other creative connections, friendships, people we know from elsewhere, bring them here to San Antonio, and hopefully kind of broaden or connect those two parts of our lives, and hopefully kind of infuse the creative community here with outside influence while also highlighting all of the amazing work that's happening here. So when that house came available, I immediately called Meaghan because we're great friends from New York and have a shared art background. And Meaghan is incredible at the nuts and bolts of how these beautiful creative visions actually come to life and how to kind of build supportive networks around them to make them happen. So I called Meaghan and was like, will you have coffee with me? And will you start this, giant life mission with me? And she was like, yes, let's do this. So
now wait a minute. Will you have coffee with me and move with your husband from New York to San Antonio?
Well, Meaghan was actually here already. She had already moved for her family and was doing lots of different remote projects. And so I was like, what's one more project for you? We'll just start a nonprofit.
Well, Liz, your story resonates with me because only 35 years ago, I was living and loving my work and career and life in New York.
Yeah.
But my wife and I had two little ones, and she was from Texas, and most of my career had been here or in Latin America. So we moved back here, and that's quite a leap to leave New York for San Antonio. But it was the right move then, and I'm sure it's the right move for you. Meaghan, what brought you from New York back to San Antonio?
So Matt and Eliz's arrival in San Antonio predated mine by about 2 years. I decided, for better or for worse, to weather the pandemic in New York and left in 2022, really having no idea why I was coming to San Antonio, other than that after 18 years in New York, it just felt like it might be time for a change.
And what were you doing there, if I can interrupt?
Sure. A variety of things. I had worked for several large magazines, a magazine called Commonweal, a magazine called Image, and I had also worked for a variety of arts nonprofits and collecting family foundations. When I left New York, I was actually living in New York, but working remotely for a gallery based in Los Angeles called Bridge Projects. And part of the reason I thought I might come to Texas is that it was looking like the Los Angeles outpost of Bridge Projects might also do something here in Texas. So the kind of constant pull from my parents to come home and just a change in my personal circumstance made me consider whether or not this was the right place. And I moved down pretty reluctantly, thinking, I think I'm just going to I'll just hang out for a while. I was working remotely, so I had that flexibility. And then I bought a house, and then I met great people, and a lot of the remote work that I was doing persisted, thankfully, and more local opportunities began to bubble up, like Parts Labor. And so I decided to stay.
And your husband's in the nonprofit space here too in San Antonio?
He is. He's from San Antonio. He went to school at UT, but has mostly lived in San Antonio. And he had been working in finance for a large restaurant group that a lot of people know, but recently transitioned away from the restaurant group into finance for nonprofits. And he's a local boy. He's a musician. He plays in a couple bands. And meeting him when I moved here, I think also helped to kind of settle me into town. And now we have our own little family. And interestingly enough, when we started Parts Labor, we were committed to serving artists that are caretakers, whether it's artists with kids or artists with dependent parents or dependent partners. But I was totally single and didn't really have any dependents, but still felt very compelled by the mission. And now, less than a year later, I have a husband and a son and a baby on the way. And I feel very much a little bit closer to the people that we're seeking to serve. So it resonates with me even more now.
Well, congratulations on the coming baby.
Thank you.
When's the big day?
June 1st.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that. Liz, I'm familiar with the PACE Foundation has a pretty celebrated international artist residency. As a matter of fact, Nicholas Frank, who's was the longtime arts and culture reporter at the Rivard Report, which became the San Antonio Report. I met him. He was the international artist in residence here I think he's from Milwaukee, and it was a sculptor. And then I'm aware of a Blue Star art residency that is the work of Angela, her last name escapes me, but it's a residency in Berlin. And those are the only two that I'm really familiar with in San Antonio. So I was really intrigued with the concept that you guys had, particularly the caretaker concept. But it's a big undertaking to establish something like that in San Antonio and recruit artists from near and far. Give us a little bit of understanding of how that's working and who's been here and who's coming here.
Yeah. I would mention one more. Saladillas has Casa Chuck. From time to time, they host residents there. So we were also aware of these other things happening in town, and being super aware of how new we are in the community. We were wanted to kind of talk to all of those people about how do you feel about us doing this thing in Southtown? We're new. We obviously are super eager and excited. We don't want to step on anybody's toes. We don't want to be redundant. We don't want to take away attention from your programming. And to a person, every single person that we talked to involved with, Art Pace, with Saladillas, with the Contemporary, everybody was super supportive and basically said more is more. And they were like, we're super happy to have new energy in our community, and we want to support what you're doing. And I think that attitude was incredibly motivating for us because, we came from New York, where it's pretty, the competition is pretty ruthless, and the resources are abundant but scarce at the same time, and space is hard to find, and everybody's competing for resources and attention. And sometimes it can feel like, a competition, and just a hustle. So it was like a breath of fresh air to just get to kind of seamlessly jump into that creative energy here. So I think what sets Parts and Labor apart from these other programs is that we're specifically hoping to invite artists and their families, artists and, they are welcome to bring their kids, they're welcome to bring a dependent partner or a parent who has, any sort of extenuating circumstances that make it difficult for that artist to participate in other residencies. And it's not like it has to be an extreme circumstance. I'm not saying that, but sometimes it's hard to kind of organize your schedule and your life around these other obligations. And it makes it difficult to up and go to, another place for months at a time. So we're hoping to kind of alleviate some of that stress and make the residency super flexible for artists. They can bring their families or not. It's just an option. They can bring them for part of the time, also have some solo time. The length of stay is very flexible.
The residency doesn't have a start and finish sort of time, like at 1 month, 3 months?
We're hoping for at least 2 weeks. That's kind of the very minimum. And then up to
6 or 8. It's easier to accommodate someone for a longer stay because they're able to be that much more productive and really integrate and kind of settle into the community. So I think, Parts and Labor is only a year old, but I think in the next 2 to 3 years, we will have kind of formalized stays and a whole process by which we welcome people. But right now we were just trying to be as gracious and accommodating as possible because we wanted to spread the word and get people down here.
Well, I mean, it's a great concept, but wouldn't most artists say, I can't pull my kids out of school and come down to San Antonio for 6 weeks? That's not practical, even if you're willing to support us bringing them.
Mm-hmm. That we've definitely come up against that with school-aged kids or parents who have school-aged kids. Some of them have like sandwiched their stay around a school break. So they'll have their family for that, like spring break or winter break or whatever, and then they'll stay for another week or so, or two, so it kind of like makes it like less of a big chunk away. And then there are obviously families with younger kids. Right now we have an artist who has a 7-month-old, and he and his wife came with her, and we've been able to provide childcare for them during the day while they both work. So yes. And those people who have school, commitments have asked to come in the summer, which originally we were like, summer's off limits. It's just too hot. But some people are interested just to have that time to work. So we're trying to be flexible with that and also offer opportunities to like, here's like access to a pool, or like here's ways to stay cool in San Antonio, because the summertime is really sought after.
I think we might like to hear about those options.
Yeah.
Who's eligible? First of all, obviously, if we have listeners who are in the art space here, they're artists locally. We're only Parts and Labor is for artists from elsewhere to come to San Antonio?
Yeah, we're sort of focusing on inviting artists from elsewhere to come stay and engage with the local community. So while they're here, we're asking them to provide some sort of public programming, whether that's a show that has an opening at the end of their stay, or an artist talk, or a family workshop, or studio visits at UTSA, or Texas State, any of the local kind of art programs, in order to kind of provide new opportunities for like artists here to connect with artists from elsewhere. That's the focus right now, but we are really aware of how, wanting to make it generative for the local community. So I think right now we're not hosting local artists, but we are looking for ways to kind of serve the local artist community.
I've been invited to events at the Pace Foundation to meet the international fellows and also to see their work. I've been to the Blue Star to see the results of people that have had the residency over in Berlin. Are people in the local art community being invited to meet the artists and to see their work here in San Antonio while they're here?
Yes, I would say that that's something that we are so committed to, and an area in which we really want to grow, because we feel like that's one of the really distinctive things about the San Antonio arts community, is that it is so hospitable, accepting, warm, and gracious. And it would be a shame for our artists to come here and not have like lots of points of exposure to that, because it is kind of countercultural, as Liz described. Like, New York is deeply inspiring. It was for us, but it's also extremely competitive and can be very like cutthroat and hard. So for artists that maybe are visiting from New York or LA or some of these markets that are more competitive, to find themselves in a place where people are having really thoughtful conversation and working at a high level, but are also just available and warm, is really important. So all of the programming that we do is open to the public, and it's almost always completely free. And we do our best to promote it, though we're always trying to find new audiences. We just think that it would be a shame for people to come all this way and stay cooped up in the house and not kind of enjoy the city for what it is. So, and really, we'll rely on partnerships with other organizations to increase our visibility so that more and more people are able to come to things.
Now, whether somebody's a sculptor or a ceramicist or a painter, does their art leave with them? What happens to the art that's created here?
They take it with them, or
we ask them to leave a piece. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Does Parts and Labor eventually become its own kind of gallery or sort of residency museum?
We do host this one auction fundraiser every year.
I'm unaware of that. When was that, or when is that?
So it has been, the last two have been early December, and we've hosted them at local restaurants. Last year it was at Liberty Bar, which was like super special to kind of connect with like the history of the kind of creative community. The Liberty Bar has kind of been a part of. This year it was at Magpie on the east side.
Oh, you're picking great spots.
I know, right?
It helps sell tickets when people know the food will be good.
It's a really fun night. And each artist who has come has donated a work for a small works auction. So that's kind of the only requirement so far, is just if they could leave a piece for the auction. It's really great for people to get to see a variety of works by past and future upcoming artists as well. This last auction we had both, a mixture of both. And also, I feel like artists are really excited to leave work. Everybody has been so generous and has had such, previous artists have been so kind of like filled up by their stay that they're like eager to leave something behind, which is really wonderful. And that has generated a portion of I wouldn't say like we have a pretty small operating budget, but that's been like a big part of our fundraising, which is cool that it gets to be a community event and people get to kind of like celebrate, and have a big dinner party together.
Well, we'll talk about that nonprofit aspect in just a second. But first, for people saying, I wish I had been at Liberty Bar Magpie, do they have to wait until next December for the next auction or Parts and Labor event? Or do you have something planned earlier than that?
We don't have a huge party and auction planned currently like we do at the holiday season, but we do have very regular programming, and some of it is meant to be very family-oriented, some of it's meant to be educational, and then a lot of it is just meant to be fun. So people can check our website to see all of our upcoming programs, and I think that we'll be doing something through the spring and into the summer that maybe resembles the auction without being the full-on auction. I wanted to just kind of piggyback, if that's okay, on your question about artists leaving items behind. That is, if they are able to do that, we find it to be super helpful and generous, and it does help us to raise our budget. But a bigger kind of victory for us is actually when an artist goes home and continues the body of work that they started at the residency to have a show in a space that's more reputable or, just isn't the Parts and Labor house. So one of our artists, Michael Gack-Levin, who lives in Brooklyn, started a small body of work, and he was making, I think he made something like 10 paintings when he was with us for just a few weeks. And he just closed a big show in New York that was covered by lots of press, and he did really well. And he credits Parts and Labor very specifically with the inspiration behind what eventually became that exhibition. So for us, we could sell works by people, but we see it as more like a feather in our cap that he went on to have this like great show somewhere else.
Well, that kind of conversation or publicity about career advancement is something money can't buy. And I wonder how many artists, because I know that you drew on your New York network for a lot of the initial artists in the first year, how many of them are going back with a completely different understanding of San Antonio. And people can be pretty negative about Texas and New York, and we're not even going to go there, but we're an urban island, as most of the major metros are in Texas. And I wonder how many people are going back and sort of engaging in what I'd call word of mouth marketing for you, and perhaps generating interest from other artists. You can be a really promising artist in New York and still fail to get a toehold anywhere because can be so cruel, the big city. And so I wonder whether or not people perhaps have had the kind of experience where they have considered, maybe I should leave New York and come to a San Antonio, or whether you've had other New York artists say, I know somebody that did the fellowship and I'm interested.
I don't know how many of our former artists are going to pick themselves up and move to San Antonio, but I do know that everybody has left with a real fondness for it that they didn't have before, either because they had never been here or because they had misconceptions about what it meant to be like a Texan. We have lots of great testimonials from artists that have said, like, I came prepared to work, really just excited to get out of like the grind, to take a little break with my family. And I left with like a lot of affection for this place that I really hope to return to. And they're talking about San Antonio. And they do. They spread the word. And we get emails from artists saying, you know, I just talked to so-and-so. They were there for a month and they loved it. Can I come? And we couldn't have expected that. I mean, we love living here and we hope that people love it as much as we do, but you never know. And so we're really relieved and delighted that people have had such a great time, especially in the heat of the summer or even on days like this where our little house is not so well insulated.
A discovery.
Yeah.
Well, how many artists are you going to host in 2025, would you guess?
We have 8 artists lined up between now and July, and we've actually just kind of...
That's busy.
Mm-hmm. It is busy. It's much busier than we expected it to be. But as I said, we're kind of in this period of really trying to experiment and learn about what we should keep doing and what we should stop doing. And the more people we get feedback from, the more it helps us to refine exactly what we're doing. For the second half of 2025, we don't have our artists lined up yet, but we've just sort of announced we both have networks of friends in Los Angeles, some of whom have lost their homes or have friends who have lost their homes. And so we've just announced that we're really eager to host artist families from LA for the second half of 25.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're going to get a response.
Yeah, we've known multiple artists who've lost, bodies of work, their studios and homes, like their whole livelihood basically, or, they have shows lined up the work was ready for, and it's just gone. And that kind of devastation is like so impactful. I feel like, when you are living in a place like New York or LA and you're trying to make work and make a living, and then you kind of have to start from scratch in so many ways. We're hoping that, offering people the space and time, can help somebody rebuild that. But it seems like such a, we're just hoping that Parts of Labor can play a small part in that rebuilding. But
looking ahead, if you have 8 artists in the first half of the year and double that to 16, do you have the resources to sustain that kind of pace?
That's a great question. And that's something I should say that, to have 16 artists in a year far exceeds our initial strategy. So I don't know that that'll happen, but it's just sort of how it worked out. In part because 2 of the 2 groups of the 8 are husband and wife pairs that are both artists, which is really nice in that we can serve 2 people at one time. But no, at this point, we are not on track to be able to host 16 people. And so we're really, this is a season for us where we're really focusing on development and infrastructure and shoring up our resources so that we can host people.
You are a 501c3 nonprofit, correct?
We are.
So there's got to be a development strategy, a fundraising strategy. And I don't know if that also falls on your shoulders, Meaghan, as your staff.
Yeah, well, thankfully, Matt and Liz have a lot of vitality and commitment to Parts and Labors and, a very large network. So that helps. But the sort of the practical outworking of our development strategy falls on me. It sounds negative. I joyfully get to do our development work.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So we write grants pretty regularly. At this point, all of the grants that we've applied for have been through private family foundations.
That's a very significant source of income for every nonprofit, basically. So I would think particularly, with your previous Texas connections, family connections and so forth, that family foundations would at least give you guys a serious look.
They are giving us a serious look, and they know that we're young, so they're interested to see what we have done and what we hope to do. And we feel like we have a pretty compelling narrative. Surprisingly to us, and this has been like a great bit of encouragement, there's families in San Antonio and Central Texas that very regularly give to the arts. And a lot of us know who some of those families are. And thankfully, they have really there's not as much public funding, so it's great that they're as generous as they are. Because of our interest in supporting families and children, we've qualified for funding that we might not otherwise have qualified for people that are interested in family dynamics and education and childcare. They've kind of taken an interest in us, and so that's something that we're grateful for. But our budget is composed of small donations, things like $25, $50 purchases at our arts auction, and then larger grants, which we hope to qualify for more and more.
You've started to build a donor base.
We have.
You have some donor strategies that every nonprofit has to adopt to be viable?
Yes. My background is in nonprofit management and strategy, so I'm not doing anything too genius over here. I'm sort of doing what I've observed at lots of other nonprofits. But we're small enough at this point that we've been able to be pretty high touch with our donors and regularly in touch with them. And I think that has helped.
Have you explored whether the city of San Antonio's arts funding is something that you would qualify for? Because that can become an annual sort of line item gift that really can help. It's bolstered many nonprofits in the arts space.
Yes, and we are eager to learn more about what's available from the city. Very eager. We've had lots of conversations with different people. At this point, we're sort of in our infancy, and a lot of the grants that we might qualify for because of our mission and vision are not available to us yet. After we've existed for 3 or 5 years, I think that we'll qualify for more, but that has not been the case yet, but we're really hoping that it will be, and we're eager to hear from any of your listeners about resources that we might avail ourselves of that we don't know about.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if some of our listeners step forward and help you. So how would they do that?
Thanks for asking that. That's a big help. You can go to our website, and on our website, it's pretty immediately clear how to donate.
That's partsandlaborsa.org, I believe.
Yes, exactly. Partsandlaborsa.org. If you Google Parts and Labor San Antonio, we're the first thing that pops up. Also on our website is my contact information and Liz's contact information, and we would be happy to correspond with you or meet with you for coffee to tell you more about what we're hoping to achieve. We're very available.
All right. Who's your current artist?
Our current artist is Chris Baker. He and his family are here from Michigan.
Family,
partner Brittany and newborn Winnie.
Okay.
Chris is a graduate of Cranbrook, and he makes his living as a graphic designer. He's designed lots of books for museums, and he's even done a little bit of design work to help us. He offered an art workshop at Keystone School last weekend for families, and that was a lot of fun. And he'll soon be delivering an artist talk, which is just sort of like a way for an artist to articulate their overall studio practice and some of the work that they've made in the past and are making during the course of the residency. You can imagine in our little house that we don't have printmaking facilities in our backyard shed. So a couple of faculty from UTSA very generously let Chris use their facilities, and he's been spending time down there.
Oh, that's terrific. At the UTSA Southwest School of Art?
Actually, at the 1604 campus.
At the main campus?
Yes.
Okay.
And so this is kind of one of the great things about the artists we work with. In exchange for all of that access to their facilities, he is going to be doing portfolio reviews with students. So that'll be happening in the next few days with graduate students and undergrad students. And that's the kind of exchange and reciprocity that we're trying to cultivate.
That's great. And who's coming after Chris?
Our next artist is Katrina Chamberlain, who is referred by one of our previous artists,
Ada Potter.
So your network in action is proving valuable. That
yes,
word of mouth in New York is spreading.
Yeah, we actually asked the first few artists that we invited for our like kind of inaugural season. After they came, we reached out to them and asked them to kind of nominate somebody that they thought would benefit from Parts and Labor based on their own experience. And so we got several recommendations from those first few artists. And I think that's been really cool to see this kind of like personal kind of sharing of, artists' experience, and then like kind of inspiring like kind of this organic web of connection to Parts and Labor. And I would say, I hope that it's reciprocal. Ada Potter also runs a nonprofit art gallery in actually it's not in Brooklyn anymore. It's in Manhattan. It's called Parent Company, and it's basically like an artist-run exhibition space. And she's doing, I think, incredible work for her own kind of local community, offering space and exhibitions. The most recent of which was just written up in the New York Times, which is super exciting. So it's cool to get to kind of see and like share in the work that our artists are doing elsewhere. So, and follow them and keep up with them. So.
Well, we're running out of time, but one last question before we go. Can people go to your website and see the work of all these artists? Are you posting what they're producing here?
We have a little feature called Diary of an Artist, which is sort of like a blog that we ask each artist to contribute to, where they document their time with their family, their time around town, and their time in the studio. And you can see works if they photograph them there. But you're making a great point. We should do an even better job of capturing photos of work that's made while it's being made. So yes, you can see some, but we should have even more of that.
Well, it's easy to tell a young nonprofit what they should be doing that they're not doing. But having been there myself, I appreciate how incredibly hard it is to just launch and sustain one of these. So congratulations on getting through your first year and looking forward to your second year. And hopefully we'll be at more events where we meet some of your artists that come to San Antonio. I'll be curious to read the blog and see what kind of observations they have about our city.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, people have been really excited about San Antonio. I know you mentioned this earlier, but at one point, Mike, when he was here, was like literally talking to his wife, Melina, about like, I don't know, like maybe we should move. He was, people are super excited about what's going on. And so I feel like props to the San Antonio community for being welcoming and encouraging in that way.
Well, Elizabeth Stehl, Kleberg, and Meaghan Ritchie, thanks for coming on to Big City, Small Town.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Well, that concludes this episode of Big City, Small Town. Thanks again to our sponsors, Weston Urban, building the city our children want to call home, and here at Geekdom, our sponsor, where startups are born. Thanks to our producer, Corey Ames, Maura Bobbitt, our in-studio production, Erica Rempel for video and social media, and Alfie De La Garza of Sound Crane Studio. We'll see you all next week.